In this video, we're going to explore the system features of the DSA installation. This video assumes that you have already downloaded and installed DSA with DGLux from the DSA website. Let's start up DSA again. We're going to do that by going to our bin directory, and we can cd right into this directory, and we can type in daemon.sh space start. This starts DSA for us. And by default, it's running on port 8080, so we can navigate to localhost 8080. Default username is dgsuper, password being dglux1234. Upon first login, you should have been presented with a license dialog. You should have requested the license. Once the license has been generated, you can refresh and you get to this new project screen. We're going to go ahead and create a new project for ourselves. Use a blank project template, click choose. Give it a name, let's use demo. And now we have our DGLux environment with our brand new project. We can click on dashboard on the bottom widget palette, navigate to gauges, and let's just drag out a gauge just so you can get a feel for the features of DGLux. You can resize, see the different properties here right on the right hand side, and play with it. In our tree here on the left, we have our project panel, which is just the files, pictures, and assets that your dashboard project is going to use. But we also have our data tab. The data tab is showing us all the nodes and metrics that are exposed by the DSA broker that's included with the installation. The two most important nodes that you're going to be using is the downstream node and the sys node. So the sys node is really all the system services that are part of your installation. The downstream node is going to be all of the connections to your installation. Under sys, we have the links folder. This is the DS links that came with the installation. As you recall, we checked to download the system DS link and the weather DS link. To start them up, because as you click on them, you can see the metrics show that they are enabled false, so they're stopped. We can just right click and say start the link. And you'll notice right away that they show up for me under downstream. So downstream children are all of the running DS Link services that this broker has access to. Now, the way DSA is architected, you can have this service be running on the same machine, or you can actually run these DS Links on distributed machines. And you will see their connections right here under downstream. You'll notice it got added, so we can click on it. Once we click on it, here is all the system information that the system DS Link is reporting. You can see something like live CPU usage, etc. We can go ahead and take CPU usage and just drop it right onto the value of our gauge. So now we have created our brand new dashboard. We can maximize this gauge by clicking this button, full size button, and we can go to File, Save File, press OK, give it a file name, let's call this a gauge, press Save, and we can right click on Preview, open the viewer link, and that's it. We created our first dashboard with live data coming from DSA. So what just happened here? Well, we started the system service, but other actions when you right click from here are things to manage this system DS link. So for example, we can get its log by clicking on the get log action. We can update it from the repository. So if it changes and maybe the DS link SDK changed, you don't have to re-download DSA and reinstall it. You can just update the specific DS link. Of course, you can stop it and restart it. If you don't want this DS link to start when DSA itself starts up or restarts, you can right-click Enable and set it to false, like so. And of course, in that case, it actually stopped it for us. If you start it, it will automatically set Enable to true. While we're here, let's also start the weather DS link. And you'll see, of course, it shows up for us right over here. Now, I already had something here pre-configured previously, but I can show you how it works. I'm going to right-click, create a tracker for, let's say, San Francisco, California, type it in, press invoke. Now it's here. Now you'll notice that all these DS links, they're exactly the same ones that are available on GitHub for you as open source. So you can, of course, go in there, look at how they're made, and create new ones, create new integrations for DSA. So this is our weather data. You explore the tree by right-clicking. Right-clicking is how you know what actions are available for you. For example, I can right-click on data flow, and this is our remote data flow, the server-side data flow, and we can create a test data flow. You'll notice I can expand it now because there's a child. I can create more demo data flow, for example. And in this case, I can press this button and actually start to create logic. Now let's just add a stopwatch, something very simple. Click the block and turn it to enabled. And the way I did that is I typed in stop and it filtered my blocks that are available to me in this list. Now you'll notice as soon as I've done that, it's incrementing its output. But we also have children now under this test data flow. You can see that child is the stopwatch, and we can see its output is incrementing. Now this is a remote data flow. That means it's always going to be running forever. And if I close this dashboard, drop in a new gauge, you'll see I can link directly from all of the blocks and everything that I create my data flow right over here. Let's explore some of the other features of your installation. The sys node itself. The sys node represents the system that DSA is installed on. So we right-click, you can see a couple options. For example, the server log. So we can see everything that's going on, all the DS links that are connecting, etc. We can restart the server as well as update the server. So when you click update, this actually gets the latest build from get.iot-dsa.org, which is the same place where you downloaded this in the first place, and updates for you, so you don't have to reinstall manually. Let's right-click links. So links, actually, one of the very useful functions here is you can install a new link, and this is the same list that you saw originally when you were installing DSA. So let's go ahead and just install a backnet DS link. Let's go through the process of getting a brand new DS link from the distribution from the internet and seeing how it works. So we have backnet. Let's invoke this, and what it's going to do is literally going to download it for you and put it right on your server, and it's finished. It's success. We click here, and we can right click and say start the link. So now, of course, it should be here for us under downstream. Let's go ahead and add an IP connection. That's going to be our IP network. I'll leave all the defaults for my office. You can expand this and right-click IP network, and let's discover devices that we have. So let's discover the backnet devices. Let's discover all the objects. There we go. So we've discovered all the objects on this EasyIO controller. And we have the digital output. Let's set it to true. So it's that easy, for example, to bring in backnet. And you saw we took it all the way from installing the DS link, instantiating it, and configuring it. Now again, as I mentioned earlier, you can right-click to explore options available. So on the controller itself, of course, you have Discover Objects. This is the simplest thing, but you can clone, edit, disable, and you have full access to all of the different settings that are pertinent to the specific DS link. Everything you're doing here from the tree, from right-clicking to seeing these metrics and nodes, is available to you to do programmatically. Whether you're creating a DS link using code, and you can see lots of samples on GitHub, or you're creating dashboards. So let's actually create a very simple example of controlling something and visualizing data from this backnet, for example, controller. Let's drag out this Boolean glow gauge. And what we want to happen is that when we click this gauge, we're going to be toggling the output. This digital output 1, we're going to be toggling it. Now, first, let's display the current status. So if I take this DO1 point, I can bind it to true. Now you'll notice it says off or on, so that means I can actually map it. And we can say, so when this is false, let's map it to false, else it's going to be a true. So once we start controlling it from the tree, you can see our dashboard is showing us the state. Now the next thing to do is to add a click action in DGLux, and we click on actions here on the right. Let's add a data action, and we can go ahead and we can right click this output, and every action that you get from the right click menu, you can actually click it and drag it over because it is actually an entity that you can drag over and use in many different places in DGLux. So in this case, we're going to drop it right on here, and we're going to say, well, the command is going to be on click. So when we click, what would we like to do? Well, what I would like to do is I would like to toggle the current output. So if it's true, I want to make it false. If it's false, I want to make it true. So now we're going to take the current value of digital output 1 and drop this on the value field itself, like so. And say, okay, we're going to map the Boolean. We're going to say, okay, if it's true, then let's make it false. Otherwise, it's true. Press OK. So now actions always work only in preview mode. So let's go ahead and test this. You can see when we're clicking, I don't know if you can hear right behind me whether the controller is clicking, but it works great. And again, we can deploy this very easily as a dashboard. And let's actually set our background color to black on the dashboard itself by clicking here, and you can see the stage is selected. And let's select black as a fill color. And why not make this pretty big? Let's go ahead and we'll save this, and we'll save this as control example. Right click, open in preview. You can see it works exactly the same way in view mode. Another example to show you the same thing with controlling is from data flow. Now you saw the GUI workflow for creating this visually, but we can actually go to our data flow that's in the dashboard. In this case, it's on the stage. Let's add a stopwatch. I can just type in stopwatch right over here. This is my favorite component. Let's say modulo 2 and start it. So you'll see it's going to go from 0, 1, 0, 1. Now let's go to DO1 here and right click and drag the set action right over here. And we can bind the output right into the value because this is what we want to be setting it to. And there's a couple of ways to execute the action. One is clicking on invoke, and the other one is to say auto run. That means it's going to automatically run and do this action every time the value changes. So you can see now this is changing. Of course, if we go to a different tab, you'll notice that it stops. The reason this stops is because this data flow is actually running in our dashboard in our web browser. If you want something to run forever and have this be independent from who's logged in, we need to run this on the server-side data flow. We can actually take this, right-click and cut it, go to our data flow. Let's go to our demo data flow. Let's paste this. And you can see it's still working. Now, remote data flow only saves when we close this. So keep that in mind. So we've now closing it. And now we can navigate to this dashboard and you'll see it's still going. That's because the remote data flow is executing in its own context on the server without the web browser. So this is the basic introduction to the features. The takeaway is you manipulate everything in DSA, all the configurations from the right-click menu to invoke actions with parameters. And you're utilizing the metrics here to bind to different widgets and components that you have available to you or that you create in DGLux. Now let's talk a little bit about behind the scenes. How do we change the port that DSA uses when it's started? How to set up SSL? How to set up LDAP integration, etc. Now you'll notice that there is a file in your DSA DGLux server installation directory called server.json. Now this file is not there initially. When you first download DSA, you don't have server.json. This gets created for you on first run. If we look what's inside this file, you'll see all the different settings. So we can set it to port 80, maybe change it to 443, and configure the certificate name and password. Now we can also configure the auth type and set it to LDAP to have it authenticate against an LDAP server. We actually have this documentation on the wiki. So you can see Here, this is how to generate your own self-signed certificate and configure DGLux server to use it. This is a wiki page on how to set up LDAP authentication. And again, configure DGLux server to use it. And the final aspect of your installation I'd like to show you is we've already explored downstream. So downstream is all the connections to our server from the DS links. In this case, the DS links are actually running locally on our computer. However, the backnet DS link Modbus, any other as we call a microservice, can actually run on any other machine or physical hardware and literally just connect to your broker and make that available to you. Now, another node that we have here is called upstream. So if downstream is representing all the connections into our machine, upstream is representing the connection of our machine to an upstream broker or server, and you can have multiple of them. The way you configure the upstream connection is you right-click on upstream under sys and you add an upstream connection. Now we're going to give it a name that we're going to identify this as. So this is going to be R&D because this is going to be our R&D machine. We're going to type in the URL to our broker, R&D broker, and make sure you have /con on the end. And let's give it our name so that the upstream broker can identify us. Now when we invoke, what we see happen is we get this upstream node for R&D, and we can actually browse in this example, this is a broker running on Amazon EC2 Cloud. So we can browse its downstream nodes. We, for example, have the system DS link right there as well. So now we can actually, from our local connection on a completely different network, access, let's say, the CPU usage of our cloud broker and take that data and visualize it. So everything works exactly the same way for you. DSA's purpose in life is to make networks transparent and to give you the full features and flexibility.